name's Gurmeet. I'm a Director of Office Sian Architecture and Design, and it's my great pleasure to present to you some of my work to date, but more so perhaps a bit of the journey for the last 10 years, and it has been a bit of an up and down journey, as I'm sure everybody can relate to. I shall try to keep things swift and moving along and try to wrap up within 45 minutes, and happy to take any questions at the end. So a bit of context, although I say we quite a lot, Office Sian Architecture and Design is just me, and it has been just me for the majority of those 10 years. Very occasionally I've employed one other person, but really for 90% of the time it has just been me, which is a scary thought actually when I think about it. I did my part 1 and part 2 in Liverpool. I did a year out in Goa in India, and qualified as part 3 architect in 2007-8, if my memory serves me correct, which is exactly at the point at which I hated being an architect, which sounds funny now, but at the time was particularly not whatsoever. I think that I don't know whether anybody else would relate to this, but it was at a time when I was in practice as a part 2 stroke part 3, and perhaps working on projects which I wasn't really connected to, not really getting much client facing time, and not really having the confidence to really say that I wanted more. So my idea was that at the point of qualifying, drawing a line under it and saying, and then applying and doing a master's in architectural history and theory at the Bartlett at UCL in London. That was around about just over 11 years ago. Whilst doing that master's, I realized that I had to earn money, as we all do. I was still living in London, and just by chance a client, a relative of a client, which is one of my last projects when I was employed, got in contact and said, look, we have a house and we'd like you to do a back extension, and had a chat with them. And I honestly think that they commissioned me because I was cheap. It wasn't anything to do with any talent that they saw or any confidence that they saw in me. I think that they just saw someone who was maybe a little bit keen, saw what I'd done and achieved with their relative's house a couple of years ago, and thought, let's just give him a shot. He's self-employed, and we can save VAT as well because he earns below the threshold, and so on and so forth. However, it still did take a good deal of faith, and or still does take a good deal of faith for any client to put their faith into a young architect, and I'm forever grateful for them for giving me that chance. Whilst doing the masters, this was a project which I really enjoyed. It's the red brick back extension to a typical semi-detached house in North London, and the contract value was sub 150k, so quite small really, and yet quite common. It was an interesting project because the brief was quite common, and I'm sure that we all continually work with these briefs, which are growing family, 2 adults, 1 child, a new child is coming along, but they were from a cultural and religious Jewish background, and I was fascinated by the concept of and the practice of separating certain foods from each other. I also knew that this was a project whereby, forever, spouting highfalutin conceptual ideas wasn't always going to cut the mustard, and perhaps the contractors were not going to be the ones to deal with sophisticated details. However, I really wanted to explore movement away and drawing a metaphor of like separation, and that coming through in window details, and a brickwork pattern which suggested an idea of nothing being in stasis. It was really my first chance to understand how I could work with concepts, ideas that I had whilst in a very cheap budget situation, and again with contractors who basically would perhaps work on projects where there would be no architect involved. So that kind of characteristic of project is something which is quite challenging for me, and I learned to keep things simple materials, off-the-shelf materials, but exploring ideas and concepts through just decent drawing packages and moments. So not many ideas in one project, but there would be a moment whereby something would just come through and a meaningful concept was delivered. I hope you can see my cursor, but this is one of the windows which I had great joy in designing. It's within the kitchen, and there's some nice little details, like there's the blinds which can be hidden in here and here in the top pieces. Yeah, so that was really, again, I remember that project as being something which was fantastic for me to work with clients who put their faith in a young architect. At the same time, there were other projects which came through where it was always interesting to chat about interesting ideas, concepts, but many clients just want a back extension. Gurmeet, can we just have a back extension? Gurmeet, we just want a shed. And there are two parts to this theme. One that I will present now, part one. Thanks, Gurmeet, but we just want a shed. Thank you very much. Can you design us one? This project, about 10 years ago, is called the Hackney Shed Project. It's in Hackney, East London, for a domestic client who had quite a nice, extensive back garden, and they were working from home quite a lot. And they wanted to have a garden studio. And again, a project where I knew there was a potential of a decent level of design quality, and yet I'd have to work with contractors who perhaps would not be interested in looking at drawings and examining details. But I ran with the idea, and the idea being something which is quite easy to make, simple materials, off-the-shelf materials, and trying to keep the cutting list for the timber quite low, so it was low waste, fully insulated wool, so it was easy to maintain, but and run over a 10-year period. And the design is a very simple timber shed, which is a studio. This photograph shows the doors in the fully open position, and again, just trying to concentrate on obviously satisfying the client's brief, which is nice, warm, welcoming, a place to lounge, but also to work, and also bookshelves. But trying to concentrate on one main idea, simple materials, and then pushing that through. And that one main idea was the shelves and the relationship to the horizontal and vertical joists, I suppose, above which sail beneath a roof light. And then, that concept is of floating, and I suppose linearity is further enforced by those joists joining the top of this structural frame here. And then the concept, I suppose, marrying the function completely, in that the spaces in between these timber structures then become shelves. So that was quite a high for me. Those two projects were relatively widely published and shortlisted, and I was rubbing my hands together and thinking, this is great. Projects are coming. I'm getting to explore ideas. That shed only cost 11K to actually build, so yeah, but it's still, it was really fun. And then, as we all know, 2008 hit, and there was a global recession, and it hit all of us quite hard. And so the next piece of architecture is something which is quite important to me, and that's my parents' home, which is the place that I returned to as a early 30-year-old architect. Yeah, I had to leave London because there were no jobs. I had some very polite emails from clients saying sorry, but we can't carry on. And I had to leave London with no jobs, no real understanding of where my career was going, and moved back into the bedroom that I was a teenager in, which is, as you can imagine, quite a low. I mean, thankfully, I had the backstop of my parents and the love and the support that they gave at that time, which was obviously just invaluable. But it did require an incredible amount of soul searching and a realization that actually our industry is quite fickle and very fragile, and I can't just bumble along. Luckily, projects coming my way and executing them. I just needed to understand who I was a little bit more. And so, no coincidence that whilst at home, I also connected with who I was as a family person, and perhaps my childhood as well. And I had a very religious upbringing, and although I'm not practicing these days, in that upbringing, the idea of community and serving the community was very important, and something that I really enjoyed. So big gatherings, big food halls, big events, and something that I realized that I hadn't that I had missed in the time that I had qualified, trying to become a hotshot architect, and failing drastically, really. And so at that time, I decided to commute into London when I could and volunteer with charities. And one of the charities that I volunteered for was the Jack Cobbs Centre, the Camberwell After School Project, which is a charity based in Camberwell in Southwark. And this is a very bad grainy image of the outside of the existing building. And they allow for activities for before school and after school for parents to drop off their kids. And I just highlighted that charity for some place that I would volunteer at, and if they wanted sketches, if they wanted feasibilities, then I would offer that at a very pro bono rate. And there wasn't really much to it, really. And I did that because I really enjoyed those broader, wider conversations that you tend not to have when there's only one stakeholder, which is a private client. It was wonderful to advance those conversations and understand that what they wanted was a refurbished internal hall. This is their first floor hall, and these are as-built pictures. And this was not as it seems now. It needs a full refurbishment, and crucially, they wanted a new mezzanine floor level here, and which was not there before. As you can imagine, with charities, sustainability and financial security is something which is incredibly challenging. And the idea from the charity was to apply to funds from Southwark, capital funds, to actually make two classrooms which could be hired out to adults and then generate income. It was a wonderful project, partly because this was a project where I really engaged with a charity and their community, and did it in a way that by putting on workshops, working with younger people and local artists, I was able to really engage with knowledge on the ground, with embedded knowledge that the parents had, with the enthusiasm that the kids had, and working with a local artist. I delivered 3 workshops around architecture, the local area, drawing, reading drawings, and painting. And at the end of the process, there was an exhibition, and then working with the artist. a mural was composed of the children's drawings and then painted on the new wall of the mezzanine, and that obviously was a huge thrill for everybody, but particularly the kids, and they got that instant buy-in, because ultimately this was their home, and they're very skeptical for anybody coming in and changing the furniture. The scope of architectural services was to design a new staircase going up, one classroom here and another classroom here, and the idea of the mural was embedded within almost the brief from a very early stage. And so I designed what I referred to as a zigzag singing wall. This is that wall without the mural painted on, as a fun, attractive feature which related to the existing structure, but also brought something new. Again, using very, very simple colors, robust materials. The idea was to not complicate things and to have it easily managed over the course of a 20-25 year period. What was fascinating about this project was that, having done it, I realized that in broad terms, working within the public realm, as in charities or with community clients or with councils, was where I wanted to be. And this project allowed facets of that process to be experienced. So there was a board of trustees, how to deal with them. There were fee negotiations, how to do that. There was client sign-off. There was multiple stakeholders. There were workshops. There was presenting at an AGM. There was presenting in front of Southwark Council. You know, for a relatively very low budget project, which is about less than 200K, all of these quite complicated processes were open to me, and I was very thankful. In hindsight, I was very thankful to actually go through that process, and it really has left a really strong impression on me when doing more bigger budget projects. I suppose off the back of the success, in inverted commas, of those workshops that I put on and placed, I was really keen to actually do more of that, and develop workshops where the end goal wasn't always architecture with a capital A or a building. You know, develop those workshops where I don't always have to be the architect with a capital A. You know, trying to develop workshops to work with young adults, young people, so that they can express ideas, you know, from a multitude of different backgrounds, socio-economic, ethnic, and just have fun and be in that learning environment. This was me being naughty and drawing on the wall, and exploring concepts of boundaries with school kids. I was commissioned by the ICA in London to put on a series of 3 workshops, and it was great fun. You know, it's a tremendous amount of learning that I'm sure that the kids can get out of it, but also for me as well. It's very much a symbiotic relationship when it works well. And even to this day, I think I do still put on workshops, and in particular with SPID Theatre Group, which are a youth theatre company based in Kensal in central North London, and periodically putting on workshops, architecture workshop, walking tours for them, so that they can take that information and produce fantastic theatre productions. So I think that project in Camberwell for the children's charity really invigorated me, and I knew that I wanted to work within the public realm, and I knew that I wanted to be someone who didn't just design buildings. But the genesis of that process started after the height of the recession. And I suppose more and more in the last 7 or 8 years, I'm getting exposure to some wonderful clients, and those other clients which aren't typically from the, I would say, inverted commas, normal architectural client base, from a very diverse ethnic, religious, spiritual backgrounds, and that's an area which is forever inspirational for me. So around about that time, I think that I was getting known a little bit in a very small circles as someone who could take a small budget and do something interesting with it, and which is a blessing and a curse, right? So, but that's what I had, and I had a very interesting connection, contact from Brent Council, a local authority based in North London, who around about 2013 had just started up a program called NAIL, which is an acronym for New Accommodation for Independent Living, which essentially the idea was for the council to buy up derelict properties in Brent and house up to 6 adults, all of whom were suffering from learning disabilities, who could live there, and each would have their own bedroom, bathroom, but there would be a communal living, sitting and kitchen area, and there would be care provided by 1 or 2 care providers on a 24-hour basis. So it was a somewhat new concept, and they got in contact with me to see if I would be interested in working up the pilot scheme. This is a property on Salmon Street in Brent. It's a very mock Tudor. I don't want to say Tudor. I don't even know what it is, but it's a horrible building, and it was pretty much in disrepair on the inside, derelict for unused for 3 or 4 years. And the challenge was how to take a very small budget, sub 200, to refurbish it and make it wonderful. So this is certainly not a project which will get on the front pages of the AJ or make Dezeen, but as a meaningful project and a process, this is very special for me. There were no external additions which were proposed for this. It was just largely new insulation and a render and a liquor paint. But for the interior, we worked up workshops. I worked up workshops to explore ideas of individuality, expression, and joy for the inhabitants of this building. And as you can imagine, I think generally the quality of care homes may be good, but they can be quite sterile in environments. But I wanted to give each person their own special place. So again, very simple concept, 1 or 2 ideas, bold colors, secret nooks and crannies, working with the existing fabric. So there's a chalkboard concertina doors where the care staff could put a menu of this evening's meal, and then it can be concertina back, and there's a small seat and a library behind. Different rooms had some rooms had different panel treatments to them, wall panel treatments to them. There would inevitably be some inhabitants of the home who were visually impaired, and although they would be very comfortable knowing where to walk, it was nice to offer them the idea that they could walk into a different room and get a different sensory experience. And the idea which I really try to push, which is very cheap, economical, which is every single bedroom, 6 bedrooms, had their own separate coloured door with their own bespoke light on top. It's like a little crown, and then that colour corresponded with the colour of their ensuite bathroom area. So yellow door, yellow bathroom. So it's not these are not highfalutin concepts, you know, and I would expect that everybody listening in on this and watching this has this level of rigor within their design, but within this context, with this council, and with this program, and with this client base of adults with learning disabilities, this level of, you know, detail and thought was not there, which is obviously a tragedy. But hopefully we've done something to address that. And off the back of this this project, the council applied for government capital funding and received money to roll this out across, you know, another 15 properties or so. So alongside those public realm projects, also need to pay the bills, obviously. So there are and have been always the private clients who can afford you a little bit more time, effort, space, and fees to explore ideas. I'd like to present 3 of those projects and run through, if I may. Middleton Road in Hackney. I'm not going to show you the exterior of the building. This is a photograph of a ground floor extension, and hopefully you can see an architect who's perhaps growing more in confidence with materials. Again, a simple restrained palette, taking a client's brief, and importantly, not only the brief, but taking the clients along the journey. So the client was an artist, and, you know, making an opportunity within the structure to have these beautiful picture frames to be displayed. Simple, robust materials: brickwork floor, brickwork half wall, Douglas fir windows and structure here, and then a real boldness in the way that I thought that structure should be expressed with the beams, steel beams, and just finding those moments. And yeah, of course, the budget is a little bit more. It's like 250k as opposed to 100k, but still, you know, I don't think that my process really changed throughout. It's just trying to find those simple, robust, honest materials, and you know, I love working with brick, and especially local brick. There's something which is so grounding about it. Of course, it's of the earth, but using those natural materials to try to, you know, yeah, try to make it as though there hasn't been an architect involved whatsoever, which is quite a challenge sometimes. Groombridge Road, which is the second of these 3 projects, again in Hackney, and a very proud terraced house here. The challenge here was to understand how brief could be satisfied of a growing family without increasing the footprint. I added a dormer at the top, but the real joy of this project came in trying to understand how this ground floor kitchen with its pokey little windows could get more light and more views out. And you can see a bit of the dormer up there. And the solution which was developed was to, I suppose this is a leaning oriel window, for want of a better term, was to propose this feature which serves as a sitting area, but also as a reclining area. It, of course, allows light into quite a dark part of the home, but crucially allows a view down to the garden. And again, a really fun project. You know, great clients who kind of take ideas and you know, have the confidence to say, yeah, let's try to go with it. And interestingly, now, you know, having the confidence to propose these ideas, knowing that the contractor will be more skilled to actually execute. And Buckingham Road, which was completed about 3 years ago. Some drawings. This is a lower ground floor and an upper ground floor plan of a 3-story terraced, semi-detached house in a conservation area. I'll very quickly run through these, but I'm sure that the photographs will be more expressive. So these are existing plans. Entering through here, it's quite a pokey entrance, very, very small footprint of a building. You know, just basically 3 rooms, living, bathroom, and then a lobby space. Lobby space, staircase going down, and then on the lower ground level as living, a very pokey kitchen, and this thing which is a bit of a sad excuse for a conservatory. And the client wanted to make everything nicer, but also have a decent back extension, so that the kitchen, living, and dining area could be part of the landscape outside. So the proposal was to, again, on the right hand side, open up the lobby space so that there was direct access into down steps into the garden area, and you didn't have to traipse all the way down the internal staircase and then go out again, leaving the living and bath as it was, and then downstairs sticking in a WC, dining, kitchen, and then a large back extension at the rear. And this is a photograph of the rear. I really enjoyed drawing this project up, and you know, thinking about how to get light into quite a hemmed in site, and the challenge of, you know, working with different levels. This is the entrance level, this is the garden level, and you can see that from the kitchen, the difference in floor level inside to the ground level outside was, you know, nearly a meter, 90 centimeters. And when you don't have that easy solution, which is, I'll just put fold and sliding doors in, and then when you open up, you know, you just go into the terrace. When you don't have that solution, how do you understand and how do you deal with the challenge of getting a decent connection with the exterior and interior elements? So the idea of having a roof light, which again dropped down and became these windows, which had a view out, but also brought sunlight into the heart of the plan, was explored. And yeah, and I suppose this bench is quite a crucial linking feature. Obviously, it relates to dining here, but it also relates to when you perch here, and you can put your elbow here, you can actually see out and, you know, have a good connection with the landscape garden outside. A bit more of a budget, frankly, so allowing the opportunity to explore bespoke wallpapers, custom joinery, and wonderfully having the chance to work with another artist who developed a beautiful artwork of this flower, and then we had that painted onto tiles, which formed the backdrop of a bathroom area. So it's a really wonderful project. I mean, I would never suggest that I was a commercial architect working within the commercial realm of offices, bars, restaurants. However, occasionally you do get that chance, and about 6 years ago I did get that chance to design a restaurant and a cocktail club. So this is the restaurant first, and I don't think I would have done it if I didn't have the chance to collaborate with a good friend of mine who is an interior designer. And that's one thing which I really, I suppose, regret early on. When I first started my practice was I think that I should have been more bold in asking for collaborations with other designers. This is in Leather Lane in Clerkenwell. It's a Vietnamese restaurant. And I suppose that on the spectrum of architecture or interior design, this is more aesthetically as an architectural project. And it was really wonderful to develop details such as this staircase, which is a relief of how the staircase used to be. And yeah, interesting. Well, different conversations, as opposed to having conversations about living, dining, kitchen, outside space with private clients. Now the conversation was about covers, tables, chairs, flow, morning traffic, evening traffic, industrial kitchen. So it's really interesting to actually have those types of conversation and work with Kai Interiors for this project. And the second commercial project that I'd like to show is a cocktail club in Gerrard Street in Chinatown in London, working within a historic building. And cocktail people, they are true connoisseurs of their trade. Having conversations about where their utensils should be placed, how deep the sink should be, trying to work within their realm, which is a real craft, was challenging at times, but a real joy. And working with an interior designer, it perhaps freed me to enjoy things which perhaps I wouldn't have proposed before, such as printed wallpaper of this scale, or being bold with colors. And it's an interesting sector to be working in. I'm not sure I'll do too much more within it, but the idea that effectively in about 10 years time someone else will probably come in and they'll change the whole thing anyway. Yeah, that's interesting. And so coming up to close to modern day, so around about 2 or 3 years ago, I had a really interesting and almost tragic phone call from a client, from someone called Belinda, who was based in Brent, and it was a first contact client. She'd heard of me from some of the work that I'd done in Brent. She was a homeowner, and she sounded very nervous on the call, and I said, is everything okay? And she said, oh well, I was a bit worried whether you would take my call, and which is a strange thing to say, really. And delving a bit deeper, it was clear that this was the impression that she had of people who work within our profession. And I must admit that when I first started my part one, that's my impression as well. And she was very afraid that actually the scale of the project, or the scope, or the budget, or her own family situation, or her own personality would not be in keeping with what with who architects work for and with. And I thought that was really illuminating and tragic at the same time, and perhaps something for us all to actually ponder on. As it happens, Belinda has been a wonderful client, and I'd like to describe the proposal now. It isn't built, it's received planning approval. This is where Belinda lives with her family. It's a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children. Belinda's husband and one of her children are severely disabled and have mobility issues. Belinda is a very successful businesswoman, and has grown her business from scratch. And she loves this area. I would perhaps describe this as a 1970s poor, very poor single-story dwelling in a larger what would be historically known as a council estate. and she wanted to you know, explore ideas of with her expanding family, yeah, living in a better place, in a brighter place, and more in keeping and more suited to the specific needs of the family members. I'd like to present to you just a ground floor plan and some drawings. This is the existing condition. So there's an entrance here. It's quite a wide lobby space, and it's a single-story building. Bedroom, 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 a bath area, and then a living and kitchen area. And there's a rear terrace area at the back. There's a public park directly behind, and between 4 and 5 story housing either side. So quite hemmed in. So the proposal was to really explore ideas of connectivity, accessibility. So accessibility obviously because there are there will be people living in the building who will be in wheelchairs, but also connectivity because across 2 floors, then it would still be nice to have some kind of connection with family members on either floor, without taking the standard stair lift, which is positioned here. The basic proposal is to have a grand entrance and a lobby space, and then quite a grand dining hall, which is well, usually I would call that dining room, but actually it's a dining hall because it's double height, and taking inspiration from, I suppose, medieval type banqueting halls where everything was 3 or 4 stories high and all rooms connected from them. And that was the main inspiration of having one central core which connected vertically and horizontally, and also led you to the outside very, very quickly. There's a central dining hall to the right, living, and then kitchen, and a fireplace in between. And to the left, quite a large circulation area, a large bathroom, a bedroom, and a bedroom. And significantly, there's a connection between this bedroom, the outside, which is covered space here, the dining hall, and straight through to the living. For the first floor, this is a void space, so expressing that double height space. A very large first floor landing, which is in effect a room and allows someone to recline here whilst looking out onto the roof garden and still connecting with people downstairs. And then bedroom, bathroom, bedroom, bathroom. And some very simple planning elevations. And hopefully this will be a really fun project, potentially to start early next year. And I've just included a couple of sketches, trying to make this entrance space welcoming for all, accessible for all, and not make it as though it's you know, wheelchair users are just add-ons, and trying to get their difficulties dissipated through design as much as possible. As I mentioned, that you know, over the last few years, it's been really amazing to get approached by incredible, diverse set of clients, and that certainly wasn't the case about 10 years ago. And I'd like to finish off with 2 projects, one which is on the drawing board and one which has been finished. This is an existing building which is owned by Darji Mitramandal Society, which is a society based in North London, and they are a Hindu religious-based cultural society, and they have a hall which they hire out to everybody, but also use for their own events. And it's been wonderful, again, putting on workshops and wondering what could happen if the existing building could be upgraded to be more welcoming, more inclusive, more accessible, and yeah, and just a lot better. As with many charities, they have a challenge of how to make their financial stability, how to maintain financial stability. So it's quite early stage at the moment, but the idea is to try to add an additional hall to the existing hall so that that can be hired out for weddings and events, and so that can basically pay for yeah, many years of the community enjoying this resource. And so finally, I returned to the shed, and it's interesting that the project which had the lowest budget, that £11,000 Hackney shed in the back garden, funnily enough, because of that, I received a commission which was for the biggest budget, and you know, was the one which has been shortlisted for the RIBA award, and that is the Phoenix Garden Community Building, of which this is not. I'd like to run through some existing photographs and give you some context. This is in Soho, and in central London, and for those who know that part of the world, Shaftesbury Avenue is just a stone's throw away from here, and you know, this is the Renzo Piano scheme behind here, that Centre Point up here, and there are theatres dotted around everywhere. The Phoenix Garden charity was established about 35 years ago, and it was established because this used to be a row of terrace houses here, which was bombed during the war, and this site went through many iterations of, you know, industrial use, you know, dumping ground, and then finally Camden offered it to the charity as a green space. There were, I think, 9 such community gardens in this area, of which now there is only one. Obviously, real estate is king, and there are many developers who have just poached all of them. However, this one retained. This one is retained and is still open. The clients, who were a charity, the Phoenix Garden Trust, they look after this beautiful garden, and at that point that they contacted me, they operated from this very small breeze box shed, which was you know, just small enough for a table and about 4 chairs, and they had a bit of a, you know, dodgy sink in there, a dodgy electricity line, and you know, it needed upgrading big time. They had received funding from Camden through Section 106 money for the Renzo Piano scheme, and felt they were well placed to actually produce a building which would facilitate enjoyment for the garden, for people visiting the garden, which is open every single day of the year and is award-winning in its own right. It is hemmed in by these monster buildings. That building used to be owned by, I think, Lloyd's, and this building here is the back of the Odeon Cinema, or one of the Odeon cinemas. And this is a view from the garden to the back of that breeze block shed. And the reason why I put that quote in again about "we just want a shed" was that at the point that they came into contact with me, it was such a wonderful project to be involved in, and there is a temptation to sometimes oversell and forget that everybody's human, and just to be calm. And I think that they kind of didn't want an architect similar to the one you know, in a tight suit with, like, you know, with quite highfalutin ideas and quite evangelical perhaps thought processes. They wanted someone who they could relate to. And it is funny how they said, actually, Gurmeet, we're gardeners, we just want a big shed. And I chuckled at that point, but having had some very decent experience of designing award-winning sheds, I kind of knew that I could do it. Thankfully, they commissioned me, and I'd like to present before the photographs just a very quick proposed plan. Street entrance through here, very busy road here and here, well, very, very noisy road, and the main, I suppose, utilitarian functions, WCs, kitchenette, storage are positioned on this road, bounding this road here. But the building really opens up when you walk in and you face this garden. This drawing also shows quite an important feature which I designed, which is the brickwork patterning layout, which you can see. There are these two columns here, and then these brickwork patterns around here, which is quite a fun thing to do. The proposal is a low energy SIP build system with highly insulated walls and a brick fascia, for want of a better term, brick facing facade and limestone lettering above. And the basic concept was to have a beautiful arch so that you could get a glimpse or imagine what was behind. And in the tradition of English garden walls, you'd have to walk through to actually understand what was behind this archway and get to a magical place. Yeah, the budget was about 500k, you know, I've had planning applications for back extensions in Barnet take longer than this go through planning. This was approved in 6 weeks, no problems whatsoever, and I think there was a real interesting process of working with the community, working with the charity, working with different stakeholders to build a very robust building for gardeners, and also a building which could be visited by school kids and you know, people from tourists, gardeners from abroad, and even you can get married there. It has its own marriage license. This is a view back from the garden, and this is quite a poignant photograph. It shows that actually the level of garden is about 1.5 meters higher than the floor of the actual interior. And I really wanted from this perspective, this building to just disappear. And so the materials on this side of the building are very natural, oak paneling, oak frame windows and doors, and to reference the oak of the existing trees. But obviously on this side, I wanted the facade and the building to really punch above its weight, because it's hemmed in by these huge, you know, 20, 30 story buildings. And I wanted this building to be bombastic, you know, Phoenix, very, very proud. The relationship to the garden was very important. So this landscape area wasn't part of the design, but I worked with the gardeners intensely to understand how the relationship could be wonderful, and how the boundary could be mitigated as much as possible, whilst also providing a very robust building, hard-working in an area of London which does take a bit of knock. The roof of the building is a green roof, so that's 90 square meters that we added in terms of green mass where there was just concrete. There are underground water tanks for every drop of water which falls on this roof. as I mentioned, super insulated ceiling, roof, and walls. And this is the view that you get when you enter the building, really. And the idea was to make you feel as if you are walking through a building without even knowing you've walked through a building. And in fact, I know, having done open house quite a few times with this building, you know, visitors walk through and they get to this point, and then they look behind and they realize that they've actually walked through a building, and that's something which I'm quite proud of. And, you know, harking back to my early learning, you know, using simple, robust materials, hardware, and working with a really decent contractor who understands details such as this, and using hidden lighting to actually create some beauty even in utilitarian areas. And yeah, it was a wonderful project to be involved in, and it's used for meetings, for chair yoga, for over 65 events, for tea parties, and marriages, and even I got married there, so which is quite a nice way to end. I think I shall end there, and yeah, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Gurmeet. That was fantastic. I'd just firstly like to say, before we get into the questions, that it was extremely humbling and great to see, I suppose, the honesty of your work and the way you communicated it. It was quite refreshing. And whether that's more so because we're all sat in our offices or kitchens at the moment, I don't know, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. One thing I wanted to ask before we got into the formal Q&A was that you talked a lot about the value an architect can bring to a project, and obviously that client had a particular well, skewed vision of what an architect was. Have you figured out exactly why that was? And I suppose the conversation we have as a society quite often is, how can we break those barriers down?
Yeah, well, I think that I think I'll perhaps try to answer the second question first, which is I think that the RIBA has a huge role to play in actually breaking down barriers into making our profession more accessible. And I do think that the more and more I think of Portland Place, the less and less I visit it, and the less relevant it comes to me and my clients, which is a shame, really. I would love there to be a fully accessible public lecture series which is promoted. You know, I would love to see the RIBA, you know, sponsor grand designs, you know, because most of our clients, they don't go to the RIBA, they go to Kevin McLeod. And you know, why can't we just, you know, get off our high horses and just understand that, you know, there's a whole richness of projects out there. Very cynically, there's a whole richness of work out there, but very in a very meaningful way, there's some wonderful conversations to be had. So that's my back of an envelope solution to perhaps how an institution can change. When it came to Belinda and that particular client, I think that that she had the same thoughts that I had as a 15, 16, 17-year-old. You know, we kind of, you know, I watched, you know, Towering Inferno. You know, I kind of saw, you know, Hollywood's depiction of architects. I got the magazines, and I could see like quite straight-laced white gentlemen presenting ideas. And you know, I'm not even that old. You know, I kind of look old, but this is like within the last 20 years. So I think that if there are certain, I suppose, media outlets which always you know, push that forward, then you know, that's what I thought. You know, like it didn't bother me too much. It's just like, okay, this is what I enjoy. But that was her reading of it. Now I do think that that things have changed in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, that you can actually see more of a diversity of more women, more ethnically different people, but there's a long way to go. But at the point of that conversation, that was what she had in her head, and yeah, I think it will always stay with me, that conversation.
That was something that I'll definitely remember from this talk, and I'm sure Belinda's not alone in that thinking, as you say.
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, I suppose part of the joy of that project was almost introducing her to the value you can offer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful project. You know,
Yeah.
it is, you know, like, it is rare for an architect to work on new build homes in London. You know, this will be it. You know, I really want it to happen. Hopefully it will happen. And you know, so you never quite know where conversations are going to lead, and I think there are a lot of preconceptions as well, which from our perspective and on us as well. But fingers crossed, that'll be a good one.
Okay, well, we'll delve into the Q&A now. So we've got a couple of questions from an anonymous attendee, so hopefully they're nice. Great presentation, so this is looking positive. And coming from a Sikh background myself, it's great to see you doing well through this varied route you have taken. Where did your obsession with the way materiality worked come from, as your use of it reminds me of the works of Alvar Aalto?
Well, that's high praise indeed. I suppose that very, very briefly, I think that I'm interested in design and exploring different ideas, but when sometimes you have a client who's not interested in that, and they have a small budget, and you know that the contractor's going to be rubbish, you have to really, really, dig deep, go to the bottom of the well. I have a brick and I have a piece of wood, and how is this going to work? Because you have to remember that when I did that first project with the curved walls and the split windows, there was no Office Sian architecture and design. I was going to be a writer. I was potentially going to teach, and I was still didn't want to be an architect. So that was my last project. That was going to be my last project.
Yeah.
And so I think that it has to come from within. And of course, Aalto's use of brickwork is incredibly, powerful, especially the house that he did for his mum. And it is trying to keep things simple as well. Just try not to be the next Aalto. Just try to be the next yourself. But yeah. We've all got Aalto books, and we've all nicked ideas from him. That's for sure.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Part of our profession is rebranding or reinterpreting precedents that we quite like, and you kind of have that stored in your mind, and you think, oh, I'm going to do something with that here, but I'm going to manipulate it. So nothing's ever truly pioneering anymore, or at least it's very hard to do that nowadays, especially with budgets.
Yeah, and especially with insurance premiums at super high, which is a different conversation. But I do believe in trying to keep things simple. One idea, one or two materials, and a willing client.
Fantastic. Hopefully that answers that question. Second question from another anonymous attendee. How has working on community and smaller projects been affected during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think that it has really. I mean, if you imagine that a board of trustees or a controlling board of trustees for a charity, where do they meet? They meet in a town hall, or they meet in their existing building, and that's where you present ideas. That's where they discuss ideas, and really a lot of the, especially for the Darji Mitramandal project, which is the penultimate one that I presented, they are all of the members are over 55, 60 years old, and you know, that's their thing. But they you know, it's difficult to have an engagement through Zoom in that perspective, and effectively those type of projects are on pause because the medium of communication is face to face, and you know, laughing, touching hands, you know, pointing, you know, helping, and so those types of projects are quite difficult to actually maintain, and we wait until lockdown is released, and hopefully they will still be there. Momentum is huge for projects where you have to, you know, G up support, where you have to say you can do this, you can get funding, this is possible. You lose that momentum, then I fear that actually that a lot of those projects, you know, just die.
Yeah,
so,
I think
yeah,
you touched on quite an interesting thing there when you were talking about not having that face-to-face communication. I've found quite often with clients that I've done very similar to your startup projects that you talked about this evening, that you need that body language, and it's almost you need to understand their brief that they're not telling you, and you can't. It's hard to do that and then inspire confidence through a screen, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to read the room.
Yeah.
You have to. I'm very fortunate to be the chair of Southwark's community design review panel, and it is such a tough gig because you are trying to you know, read the room, and also, you know, we talk about diversity in many different aspects, but there's also diversity of personality. You know, there are extrovert characters and there are introvert characters, and equally everybody has something meaningful to say, and on a Zoom chat it is nigh on impossible. You know, you have to have a real skill to actually, you know, read that screen, you know, try to G up support, and so it's a real challenge, and you know, yeah, difficult.
It is. Right, I think the next question is actually from our very own Sarah, who's on our committee. She's put two questions in, actually. Question one, how did you find your passion for architecture again after feeling a little lost as a part 1/2?
I think that to be honest, I'm a very slow learner, and I think that in a London practice, and I was very supported in my part 2 work experience. I didn't grasp detailing, timesheeting, you know, these kind of prosaic things, very important things, quick enough, and I really lost confidence in that. And as anybody who has their own business knows, you know, that is super important. That those kind of menial jobs that nobody really teaches you about. So I thought that actually that I had lost confidence in architecture, but I hadn't lost confidence in architecture. I just lost confidence in the business of architecture, and I had to separate those two out. And you know, slowly, again, I can't be more thankful to those early clients who put their faith in a very young architect with little portfolio and basically gave him 100k to play with, which is shocking, really. You know, they really, you know, contained that creative space, allowed me to actually you know, go through it, probably make mistakes, you know, but then emerge. So I don't think that, you know, retrospectively, you know, you have your love for something, but other things do cloud it, and you have to, I suppose everybody has to negotiate how they tackle the things that they don't want to do.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously the influences of the television programs, and you said that there was a budget there of 100k. Was that anything to do with that TV program that was called the 100k House, or was that just purely coincidental?
No, it was just broadly coincidental.
Brilliant. Second question from Sarah: how do you manage your time working on your own, and who do you throw ideas around with?
My 3-year-old son. So I So I think that that I realized a few years ago that this was an issue, that that I do need to vent out some ideas, and I'm very proud. I mean, first of all, architects do not work in isolation. There are so many people that I just haven't mentioned: structural engineers, client bodies, you know, other designers who we take inspiration from and who impact the design. But when I think back to designing the Phoenix Garden community building on my own, I kind of think, okay, fine, perhaps I should have done it with someone else. So so I'm a firm believer in trying to find the right clients who allow for a level of collaboration, which is quite hard to find, I appreciate, but I think that I'm at a position whereby I can kind of attract those types of clients. So there is a level of critique which happens, as we all know, through the client architect relationship. But there is no substitute for bouncing ideas from off a fellow staff member. I mean, I can't make any you know, excuses about that. In the last 2 years, I have been very fortunate to collaborate with bigger practices, Adam Khan Architects, Karakusevich Carson Architects, to work on larger regeneration projects, whereby one building would be one that I design, and I find that really amazing, actually, because it gives me access to a knowledge base and a critique that that actually I can't afford to have. And so that's how the studio is running at the moment. Yeah.
Brilliant. We have a comment from, apologies if I pronounce the name wrong, Jasneet Ratan. He says, hello, thank you for the lecture. So we can say that one's been answered.
Hi, Jasneet.
Next question is from Ben Price, who's our social secretary. It's quite an essay, which is typical of Ben. Thanks for the presentation. You've been on such an inspiring and I'm sure very relatable journey. As someone who is doing their Part 3 currently and one day hoping to do projects on my own, the idea of going it alone is quite scary. You mentioned that you have worked with others now and then, but in general, how have you found working and learning through the process of being an individual whilst creating your projects and studio? Has this been as intimidating as it seems from the outset?
So if I know what I know now, perhaps I wouldn't have done it on my own.
Yeah.
Because there are, I'm just going to take my headphones on because I think that my battery's going low. Yeah, so yeah, through lots of knocks and lots of scrapes and lots of nurturing clients, which I've been very fortunate with, and taking opportunities. So look, starting up on your own as a fresh architect, I think that there is a lot to learn in collaborations and still getting more experience. And I think that if I had my time again, I just needed to find an architect's practice that I felt that I could really grow in. And I think it was perhaps a little bit too early for me to branch off on my own. Around the time that I did branch off on my own, I was on the tube and I saw on the same carriage Sarah Wigglesworth, and being a huge fan of hers, I nervously went up to her and said, "Oh, look, I'm a huge fan of yours. Do you have any tips? I'm just about to start on my own." And she was like super cool, and she said, "Look, my one tip is that you got to start knowing people. You know, like you have to start meeting people, knowing people, telling them that you're an architect. You have to start getting your face around." And basically she was saying that an architect is no one unless you have a client body. So the other thing that I would say is that I wasn't obsessed, but I was quite concerned. It's like doing something bigger, better. But hopefully what I've shown is that my smallest project, which is the Hackney Shed, actually led to my most prized project. So, you know, knowing that whatever scale project that you have, you know, that is your gem, and do it to the best of your ability, and the right clients know that design skill is scalable. You know, the clients of the Phoenix Garden Community Building saw that shed, and they didn't see 11K. They saw actually, you know, so this guy's put some effort in, beautiful details, you know, it works, and they just scaled it up. And so those are the type of clients which really are gold. So so yeah, try to collaborate as much as possible.
Fantastic. There you go, Ben. You've got the recipe now. Next question, again, apologies if I pronounced the name wrong. Malika Prakash, thank you for such an impressive talk. Your work is truly fascinating. My question is, to what extent do you consider the environmental implications your buildings have, i.e., do you consciously think about sustainability in the materiality?
Yeah, so so two most, I suppose, recent projects is Belinda's one. So we're trying to go through for a proposal which retains the existing building. So so it is going to be a 2-story home. So trying to retain the existing, so there'll be less waste, and so that's something that we're really pushing for. In terms of holistic sustainability, it is front and center, and probably most evidenced by the Phoenix Garden Community Building. So that is a building which was built off-site in a shed in the north of England using super insulated panels, bought on site, you know, and you know, it has an incredibly you know, insulative envelope. Every drop of water is stored underground. There's underfloor heating. There's an air source heat pump which provides electricity even when temperatures are close to 0. You know, so that is a really, you know, and that is the scale of a house, that building. So it is something which is fascinating to me, really enjoyable to actually work with, and I think that that yeah, more and more as more innovative solutions and cost-effective solutions come about, I think that there'll be more incorporated in.
I suppose with the current targets that we need to meet, it's becoming more of an involved process. I mean, I've certainly noticed that we're having sustainability consultants on from planning stage now, and you know, you've all these credits to meet. So it's the way things are going, and rightly so. Next question, again from another anonymous attendee. I note that we've got 6 questions left to go through, so I'm going to have to just kind of pick and choose after this one because we don't want to keep Gurmeet all night. But the question is, you mentioned the difficulty of working with contractors who were not familiar with working outside of the normal industry standards. How did you go about finding contractors willing to take on high-level details? Was this through developing the relationship over time with trial and error through different projects, or more the way you approached any person you worked with?
So this is where a decent network is wonderful, such as your society here. You know, having a linked spreadsheet of, you know, decent contractors in the area who work at different scales. You know, our designs are nothing if they are butchered by contractors, and we also know that the best contractors make our designs better. So it is fundamental. You know, the bar for me at the beginning of my Office Sian career was fairly low. You know, can you just read the drawings, please?
Yeah.
You know, it is. I mean, my wife is bemused how I always say that, and she's like, how can builders not read drawings? But I don't know how you guys feel, but that bar is really low. And then I suppose you do get what you pay for, And if there is a client who is interested in design and is interested in investing their money in an architect, you can then also have a conversation that actually perhaps by going out to a decent tender process with contractors who aren't just going to botch it is going to be beneficial for you. So definitely talking to other architects and also having that honest conversation with clients.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I had a friend who works for a practice where all their contracts are traditional, and they only use two contractors.
Yeah. Well,
that's not that competitive for pricing, but they said that they just have this agreement where they know their standard of work, the clients are happy, they buy into the brand the company offers, and it's really humbling as well, because they all know each other, and I think you get a better product from it.
Definitely, that's for sure.
Right, let me just have a scroll through and have a quick look now. This is quite a current question, I think, actually, again from another anonymous attendee. Do practices need to adapt to understand the students coming from part 2, or is it more reliant on education to prepare them better? Now, I ask this because I know it's been in the architectural press quite recently about part 2's been unhappy with their current working environments, but just wanted to maybe get your...
I mean, so my policy with employing part 1s and part 2s is that I've never taken on interns whatsoever, even though there have been lots and lots of offers, hundreds of offers over the last 10 years, and that's purely on the basis I think that people should get paid for doing work, and I'm really obviously it's unbelievably damaging to our industry to know that there are practices out there who are exploiting students, and knowing that also that an architect's wage isn't that much anyway. It is not for us to really grow our industry into a more welcoming, diverse workplace. Then these practices need to change quickly, and perhaps those studios need to be named and shamed so that they can change. I do feel that perhaps the RIBA and the ARB have a bit more of a role to play in sometimes you can kind of give a bit of a carrot, but maybe there's a policy which is in the form of a stick, which needs to be implanted within not just guidance, but something which we can all sign up to, or we have to sign up to, because But I have to also say that I have a practice of one, so I don't have a great deal of experience of actually employing other people.
It's interesting you say that, because I had a conversation with the director of the practice I work for the other day, and he said, it's great until you employ people, and then you have to look after the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, he says, that becomes my job. That's not why I set up, but
I'd like to try it once, though. Maybe I'd like to try it once.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, there's a couple of comments, actually. So this one's from an anonymous attendee. Not a question, but wanted to note, I studied your work on the Phoenix Garden for my thesis project, and finally got the chance to visit it between lockdowns, and can say seeing it in person was absolutely inspiring.
Yeah, thank you, anonymous.
And I suppose just one final question then, which you may have kind of answered. Are there future plans to expand, or do you feel comfortable in your current setup with collaborations?
I think that collaborations are the way forward. If I want to keep on working within the public realm, then those type of Phoenix Garden projects where they pick you out like a needle in a haystack may not happen again in my career. So my path to do more community and more housing is to work on those larger regeneration projects which are council led and are made up of a consortium of architects. So that's where I feel that the growth of the practice is going. I also feel that there are two different types of growth. There is growth in terms of how many people you employ, but there's also personal growth, and I can firmly say that I feel that there's been personal growth in my journey over the last 10 years, and hopefully in my words and in my slides I have shown that progression. So I'm not too worried about, you know, growth. I want to get 5 people, I want to get 3 people. That is an ambition, but I certainly want to grow as an architect. I'm sure that that maybe those two ambitions will align, but I'd rather grow as an architect and then work out how to employ people.
I mean, every day is a school day, which is cliche, but it really is true, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose in relation to that, and this is kind of like a question that Sarah Maffey asked, was you mentioned you were looking at pursuing writing. Is that something that you're looking to bring in with practice? You know, sharing your experiences in a different way?
I would love to write, but I think that it would be a work of fiction, to be honest. There's already too much architecture in my life. It'll be something unrelated. But
yeah, you need that cleansing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, well, that's it for the Q&A. I think we got through every single one apart from one, but I know, you know, we've crept past 8 o'clock, so... Do
you want to do that final one? Do you want to do that final one?
You can do if you want, yeah.
Yeah.
So this one, again, anonymous attendee. So whether this is all the same anonymous attendee, I don't know. A lot of your projects seem to prioritize a relationship with nature and a connection with the outdoors. Is this something that that's always been important to you?
I think it is important to me, but I also think that it's an obvious element of all the briefs, really. So I think that it's something which I get quite excited about. I mean, it's quite easy and lazy to say that the Phoenix Garden project, there had to be an engagement with the nature and with the outside environment, but I suppose the Buckingham Road project, which is that semi-basement and those timber windows coming down, I just thought that it was something really, really interesting. And I tend not to. I do know my limits as an architect. I'm not a landscape designer, and that is a wonderful protected profession. But I do have this thing whereby as an architect, it would be very good to have a strong understanding, if not control, over those elements directly outside of your building, as well as obviously the elements within your building. Yeah. And you know, the actual nature of walking through any of the buildings that I've designed, I look at the views through windows as a very, very interesting developmental tool to actually understand how the atmosphere can change. And so I think that I don't know whether it's natural or not, but it's something that I'm truly interested in.
No, I think that's evident in your work, actually. You know, the basic architectural things of light, form, function, you know, the views out of the building. And I think as well, it's honourable that you mentioned, you know, where the line is as to where your expertise stops.
Sure, yeah.
There's a lot of architects out there that we can probably all think of that have just said, yes, we can do that, we can do that. They've taken the client's money, but actually they've not delivered the whole vision.
Yeah.
Which is probably not adding the value back in, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that really we have enough on our plate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like we said before we joined the chat, it's we have many hats.
We do. Yeah.
I'll hand you back to Josh now so he can close out.
Yeah, we certainly don't need to take any more hats on it.
No.
So yeah, asking for punishment that. So I think I'll just close out the evening. Thank you, Mick and Gurmeet, for the Q&A and the presentation. It was much appreciated, and we certainly all enjoyed it. Yeah, so just a heads up for our next couple of events. We have at the other end of the scale, the Jessico and Wiles project, which is a large master plan within the centre of Nottingham, which is, I believe, going on site soon, is it, Mick?
Yeah, so it's the first phase, which is split into two, of a site that's been under design. Well, it's been remaster planned for probably the last 15 years, and finally, it's the big hole that's in the middle of Nottingham is going to be filled, or the first piece of the puzzle is going to be there.
Yeah, so and spaces are running out on that allocation. So if you are interested, then by all means register. So that will be next on the 18th of March. And we also have a roundtable regarding the planning white paper that is happening, and that will be on the 23rd of March. And there's more information on that on our website. Yeah, I think that's everything. So I think on that note, I will close this evening. Thank you again to Gurmeet and Mick, and hopefully I'll see you all at our next event. Okay.
Thank you very much. Cheers. See ya.